A billionaire found two 6-year-old twins sitting alone in a freezing park, guarding pink suitcases and waiting for their mother who never returned. They didn't cry. They didn't ask for help. When he learned why the billionaire was devastated, because someone had taught them to live invisibly. At 34, his name sat on glass walls and magazine covers, tech deals, property towers, visionary stitched to him like a suit he couldn't take off. But that Tuesday evening in Chicago, he walked out of his headquarters feeling like a man who had been hollowed out and polished. The day had been brutal. A board meeting that turned into a cage match. A contract that slipped through his fingers like wet paper. A room full of people nodding while nobody actually listened. Grayson didn't lose often, but when he did, it always cost him something private. He didn't call a driver. He didn't call anyone. He just walked. Lincoln Park was only a few blocks away, stretched along the lake like a dark ribbon. The wind off Lake Michigan cut clean through his coat, sharp enough to make your eyes water. The trees were in that late fall state, half bare, half burning leaves, clinging like they didn't want to admit the season had changed. The sky was bruised purple and orange, the kind of sunset that looked too beautiful for how cold it felt. Grayson loosened his tie anyway. He took a breath that tasted like metal and distant water. Around him, the city played its normal soundtrack. Joggers with earbuds, couples holding hands like it was a promise. A father pushing a stroller, whispering something that made the baby squeal. Grayson watched them with a strange detachment, like he was looking through glass. His penthouse was warm. His life was safe. And yet he always came here when the corporate world got too heavy. Because this place reminded him what quiet was supposed to feel like. He kept walking, eyes on the path, mind on nothing. Until he saw something that didn't belong in a park at dusk. Something small, still, and heartbreakingly wrong. At the far edge of the park, where the lamps hadn't fully flickered on yet, a bench sat half hidden behind an old oak tree. Most people never looked that way. There was nothing there worth seeing, except tonight. Two small pink suitcases stood upright beside the bench, bright, childish, almost cheerful against the gray. Like props left behind after a play. Like someone had set them there and forgotten to come back. Then Grayson noticed the girls. Two little figures pressed close together, knees pulled to their chests. Their hair was the same shade of light brown, their faces the same shape, twins. Maybe 6 years old. Too thin. Too quiet. They weren't playing. They weren't talking. They weren't even moving the way children moved. They stared forward as if they'd run out of hope and were saving what was left. Grayson stopped mid-step. A warning rose in him, the instinct every rich man develops to avoid problems that can't be solved with money. He told himself their parents were nearby. He told himself it wasn't his business. He told himself to keep walking. And he almost did. Then one of the girls turned her head. Her eyes met his. Big, dark, and tired in a way a child's eyes should never be. It hit him like a punch to the ribs. Grayson didn't think. He just moved slow and careful, like you approach a frightened animal. He stopped a few feet away, hands visible, voice gentle. "Hey," he said. "Hi, sweetheart. Are you two?" "Okay." The taller twin lifted her chin slightly, like she was deciding whether he was safe or dangerous. Her cheeks were smudged with dirt. Her lips looked dry, cracked from wind. "We're fine," she said softly. The other twin didn't speak. She only tightened her grip on her sister's sleeve. Grayson glanced at the suitcases again. The image didn't make sense. "Are you waiting for someone?" he asked. The girls exchanged a look, silent, quick, private. And the taller one answered like it was the most normal thing in the world. "Yes," she said. "We're waiting for Mommy." Grayson lowered himself onto the far end of the bench, leaving space between them so he wouldn't scare them. The wood was cold enough to bite through his slacks. "My name is Grayson," he said quietly. "What are your names?" The taller twin hesitated, then nodded once as if confirming a decision in her head. "I'm Ivy," she said. She tilted her face toward her sister. "And this is June." June's gaze flicked to him, then down again. Her lashes were wet, but no tears fell. Not even that. As if she'd learned crying didn't bring anyone back. "Nice to meet you," Grayson said, and his voice came out steadier than he felt. "Where's your mom?" Ivy's shoulders rose and fell in a small, controlled breath. She spoke carefully, like she was repeating instructions. "Mommy went to get food," she said. "She told us to stay right here. She said we're good girls if we stay right here." Grayson forced himself to keep his tone calm. "Okay." "When did she leave?" June lifted her hand. 4 fingers. They were small fingers, dirty at the nails, trembling slightly in the wind. 4, June whispered. Grayson's brain tried to protect him. 4 hours. 4 minutes. 4. Days, he asked, and his own voice betrayed him, cracking at the edges. Ivy nodded. "Monday morning," she said. "She said she'd come back fast." The park around him blurred. The joggers, the lamps, the lake wind, everything pulled away until there was only this 2 children, sitting like abandoned luggage, waiting on obedience and faith. Grayson swallowed hard, throat suddenly too tight. "You've been here." "Alone," he managed. Ivy nodded again like it was obvious. "We take turns," she said. "One watches, one rests." June pointed behind the oak tree with a tiny motion. "We sleep there," she murmured. "Leaves. When it rains. Under the bench." Something inside Grayson broke with a soft, quiet snap. He stared at them, and before he could stop it, his eyes burned. A tear slid down his face, then another. And Ivy watched him, calm and curious, as if adults crying was something she'd seen before. "You're crying," she observed. Grayson wiped his face with the back of his hand, but his voice shook anyway. "I'm sorry," he whispered. You're too little to be doing this." Grayson forced his breathing to slow the way he did in boardrooms when men twice his age tried to intimidate him. But this wasn't a negotiation. This was a wound. "Okay," he said softly, wiping his face again. "I'm going to ask a few questions, all right? Not to scare you. Just to help." Ivy's chin lifted. She looked like a tiny soldier. "Okay." Grayson glanced behind the oak tree. The shadows there were thicker, the kind of dark the city pretended it didn't have. "You said you sleep back there." June nodded, eyes still lowered. "It's quiet." "Can you show me?" Grayson asked. The twins moved as one. Ivy stood first, steadying June by the elbow like she'd done it 1,000 times. They led him behind the tree to a narrow gap between shrubs and a fence line. It was hidden from the path, hidden on purpose. There on the ground was a bed made of dry leaves and torn cardboard. Leaves layered like blankets. A small depression where 2 bodies had pressed into it night after night. Grayson's stomach turned. "You made this?" he asked. Ivy nodded. "Mommy taught us how to make it softer," she said, like she was describing arts and crafts. "We gather the dry ones. The wet ones smell." When it rains, Grayson's voice came out rough. June pointed toward the bench. "Under," she whispered. "The bench keeps the drops off. Sometimes." Grayson looked at their hands, chapped raw around the knuckles. Their coats weren't really coats. Thin jackets, sleeves, 2 short cuffs, dark with grime. The cold had been chewing on them for days. "Have you eaten today?" he asked. Ivy hesitated, then told the truth because she seemed incapable of lying. "Not today." June's voice was so small he almost didn't catch it. "Yesterday, someone gave 1 sandwich." 1 sandwich, Grayson repeated, and it sounded like a crime when he said it out loud. Ivy rushed to add, as if defending their mother. "We shared it. Mommy said we always share." Grayson's jaw tightened, and before that June shrugged a fraction. "Sometimes, trash," she said. "Not dramatic, just factual, like the word had stopped being shameful. Grayson closed his eyes for half a second, the world tilting. In his pocket, his phone buzzed, another work email, another problem someone expected him to solve. He wanted to throw it into the lake. He opened his eyes and crouched down so he wasn't towering over them. "Listen to me," he said, voice low, steady. "You two did nothing wrong. You were brave. You were smart. But you shouldn't have had to be." Ivy blinked slowly. "Mommy said if we were good girls, she'd come back faster." That sentence hit harder than the wind. Grayson looked past them back toward the bench, and for the first time he noticed the people moving through the park, like ghosts walking by, staring at their phones, stepping around the edges of other people's pain. He tasted anger, hot and sharp, and something else: responsibility. Grayson guided them back to the bench. He didn't touch them without permission, but he stayed close enough that the cold had to get through him first. "What's your mommy's name?" he asked gently. Ivy's face softened at the question, as if saying her mother's name was a blanket. "Serena," she said. "Serena Mercer." June whispered it too, like a prayer. "Serena." Grayson repeated it, locking it into his memory. "Serena Mercer," he said. "Okay. Does she have a phone?" Ivy shook her head. She said phones cost too much. Any family A friend he tried. June lifted her shoulders. "It's just us." Of course it was. Grayson drew a slow breath and made himself speak carefully. "I want to take you somewhere warm and get you food, just for a little while. Then we can come right back here." Ivy's eyes widened with fear. "Mommy said don't leave," she blurted instantly, regretting how loud she'd spoken. She glanced around like she expected punishment. Grayson softened his voice even more. "I hear you. And you've done exactly what she asked. But staying here tonight is dangerous. It's getting colder. And I can't walk away from you." June looked up for the first time, her eyes glossy. "Will you bring us back?" "Yes," Grayson said without hesitation. "And I'll make sure your mom knows where you are." He reached into his wallet and pulled out a crisp business card, Grayson Hale, the kind of card people treated like a ticket. He flipped it over, took out a pen, and wrote slowly so it would be readable: "Ivy and June Mercer are safe with me, Grayson Hale. We are at Waverly Diner, 2 blocks east. We will return by 7:30 p.m. Phone 312-55507. He paused, then added one more line because he'd learned that details saved lives. "If you are Serena Mercer, ask for Grayson." He placed the card right in the center of the bench. Then he set a small stone on top so the wind couldn't steal it away. The stone made a quiet tap, like a final decision. "There," he said. "Now your mommy has a message. She'll know exactly where to find you." Ivy stared at the note as if it were magic. "What if someone takes it?" she asked. "Then I'll write 10 more, Grayson said, and he meant it. And I'll put them everywhere." June's gaze flicked to his face, searching for the trick. "You promise?" Grayson's throat tightened. "I promise," he said again, this time to all 3 of them. He picked up one pink suitcase, surprised by how light it was, then the other. Ivy tried to lift hers and almost toppled. June stumbled with hers too. Grayson took both in one hand each. "I've got them," he said simply. Ivy's shoulders relaxed a fraction, like some part of her had been holding her breath for 4 days. And they walked together through the park, 2 little shadows and one man who suddenly understood what his money was for. Waverly Diner glowed like an island. The windows were fogged from heat and cooking grease, neon flickering blue and pink in the dusk. Inside, the air smelled like butter coffee and something sweet enough to make you remember childhood. Ivy and June slowed at the door, staring as if they were entering a different world. The bell above the frame chimed softly when Grayson pushed it open. A waitress looked up with the tired kindness of someone who'd seen every type of heartbreak walk in. She opened her mouth, then saw the girls' faces and didn't ask questions. Grayson chose a booth by the window, not for the view so he could see the park across the street, so the girls could see it too, so they wouldn't think he was stealing them. They slid onto the vinyl seat side by side, knees tucked in. Ivy's hand found June's automatically, their fingers laced tight like if they let go, the world might fall apart. "What would you like to eat?" Grayson asked. June leaned to Ivy's ear and whispered something. Ivy's cheeks turned pink. She looked down at the menu like it was dangerous. "She wants to know how much things cost," Ivy admitted. "We don't have money." Grayson felt that familiar burn behind his eyes. He forced a gentle smile. "It's on me," he said. "All of it. You can order whatever you want." Ivy blinked. Whatever, he repeated. "I'm serious." The waitress approached. "Hey, sweethearts," she said softly. "You hungry?" June nodded once quickly like she was afraid hunger was a bad word. Ivy cleared her throat, trying to be brave. "Pancakes," she said, "with strawberries and hot chocolate." June's voice followed, barely louder than a breath. "Extra strawberries, if that's okay." "It's more than okay," the waitress said and scribbled it down. She looked at Grayson. "You coffee," he said. His appetite had disappeared somewhere behind that oak tree. When the food arrived, the plates looked enormous in front of their small bodies. Steam curled up. Butter melted into golden pools. The hot chocolate was topped with whipped cream that June stared at like it was a miracle. They didn't attack the food the way starving people do. They ate slowly, carefully, like every bite needed permission. Ivy cut June's strawberries into tiny pieces without being asked. June slid half her pancake onto Ivy's plate. No words, just instinct. "You take care of each other," Grayson said quietly. Ivy nodded. "Mommy taught us," she said. "She said sisters protect." June swallowed, then whispered, "Mommy is coming back." Grayson stared at the window at the park beyond the glass where the bench waited like a witness. He didn't know if Serena was coming back, but he knew one thing with absolute clarity. Tonight, these girls would not sleep under a bench. Not again. They walked back to Lincoln Park together, the warmth of the diner fading with every step. The sky had darkened into a deep slate blue, and the wind off the lake carried the sharp promise of rain. Ivy and June ran ahead, their small legs moving faster than Grayson expected. Hope had given them energy. Grayson followed, his eyes locked on the bench, as if it were a verdict waiting to be read. The pink suitcases were still there. The note was still exactly where he had left it, pinned under the small stone. Untouched. Ivy reached it first. She picked it up carefully, as if afraid it might fall apart in her hands. Her eyes scanned the words, her lips moving silently as she read. June stood on her toes, peering over her shoulder. "She didn't come," June whispered. The words weren't angry, they weren't accusing. They were simply heavy. Ivy looked around the park, turning slowly, searching behind trees along paths toward the playground that was now empty and dark. "Mommy," she called softly. Only the wind answered. Grayson checked his watch. It was nearly 8:30 p.m. The temperature was dropping fast. The lamps flickered, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers across the ground. Ivy hugged the note to her chest. She said she'd come back fast. She murmured more to herself than to anyone else. Grayson crouched beside them. "Sometimes fast takes longer than we want," he said gently. "But staying out here tonight isn't safe." June looked at the bench, then at the dark behind the oak tree. "We can sleep there again," she offered like a solution. The thought made something twist violently inside Grayson. "No," he said before he could soften it. He caught himself and lowered his voice. "Not tonight. Not in this cold." Ivy's eyes filled, but the tears still didn't fall. "But Mommy said I know what she said." Grayson interrupted softly. "And you listened. You were brave. But tonight you need warmth, and I won't let you get sick." The rain began as a mist barely noticeable until it wasn't. Cold droplets dotted Ivy's hair. June shivered. Grayson stood and held out his hands. "Come stay with me tonight," he said. "Just tonight. Tomorrow morning we come back here. Early, I promise." June hesitated. "Can we bring our suitcases, of course?" "And the note?" Ivy asked. Grayson nodded. "We'll bring it. And if she comes, she'll find us." The twins exchanged a long look, the silent twin language of fear and trust. Finally, Ivy placed her small hand in Grayson's. "Okay," she said. And with that single word, the night changed direction. The building rose above the street like a sheet of glass and steel. Ivy craned her neck until she almost lost her balance. "Do you live here?" June asked. "Yes," Grayson said, suddenly self-conscious. At the top. The elevator doors slid closed with a soft hum. June stared at the glowing buttons like they were stars. Ivy pressed the number. Grayson pointed to her finger, lingering as if afraid it might disappear. When the doors opened on the top floor, a wall of silence greeted them. The penthouse lights flicked on, automatically revealing clean lines, pale walls, and wide windows overlooking the city and the dark lake beyond. It was beautiful. And empty. Ivy stepped inside carefully, like she was afraid to break something. "It echoes," she whispered. June nodded. "It's too quiet." The words hit Grayson harder than he expected. He had never noticed the silence before. It had always felt peaceful. Now it felt wrong. "Let's get you warm," he said quickly, moving past the discomfort. "Bath first." The bathroom filled with steam. The twins stared at the bathtub like it was a swimming pool. "For both of us?" June asked. "Yes," Grayson said. "Plenty of room." While the water warmed, he searched his closets. He found 2 old college t-shirts, soft, clean, absurdly large. He folded them carefully and left them by the bathroom door, then stepped away to give them privacy. When they emerged 40 minutes later, they looked transformed. Clean hair, pink cheeks wrapped in oversized shirts that fell to their knees. "I feel fancy," June said, spinning slowly. "Like we're rich," Ivy added, touching the fabric with wonder. Grayson swallowed. "You're just warm." He made up the sofa with blankets and pillows, building a nest, the way Ivy had described building beds from leaves. He noticed how both girls watched him, memorizing every movement, as if preparing for something to vanish. When they finally sat down, Ivy spoke quietly. "Ethan." She corrected herself quickly. "Grayson." "Yes, Mommy has a scar," she said, "on her chin, and a silver ring with a blue stone. She never takes it off." Grayson grabbed a notepad and wrote it down carefully. Every detail mattered now. "I'm going to find her," he said again. "I don't know how yet. But I will." June yawned, fighting sleep. "Promise." Grayson met her eyes. "Promise." Grayson stayed awake long after the girls fell asleep. Ivy lay on her side, one arm protectively draped over June. June's fingers clutched the hem of Ivy's shirt even in sleep. Their breathing slowly sinked, shallow at first, then deeper. Grayson sat in an armchair nearby, laptop closed on the table. Work could wait. This couldn't. He watched them and felt a strange pressure in his chest. Not fear, not sadness, but something heavier. Responsibility. His phone buzzed. A message from his assistant. Another meeting reschedule. Another request. He muted it. Instead, he opened his notes and began typing names and details. Serena Mercer, scar on chin, silver ring with blue stone, missing since Monday morning. He sent one short message to Naomi: "Find me the best private investigator in Chicago. Urgent. No budget limits." At 3:12 a.m., a sound cut through the silence. A sob. Grayson stood instantly and moved to the sofa. Ivy and June were sitting up, knees pulled in, shaking. "We had a bad dream," June whispered. Ivy swallowed hard. "She didn't come back," she said. "In the dream." Grayson sat on the floor in front of them, so he wasn't towering over their fear. Dreams lie, he said gently. They borrow your worst thoughts and pretend they're real. But what if it isn't a dream? Ivy asked. What if she can't find us? Grayson didn't rush the answer. He chose it carefully. Then she's trying, he said. Mothers like yours don't stop trying. June leaned forward, pressing her forehead into his shoulder. Ivy followed, hesitant for half a second, then wrapped her arms around him too. Grayson froze, then slowly, carefully wrapped his arms around both of them. Their sobs soaked into his shirt. I won't leave, he said quietly. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. Not until she comes back. The girls clung to him like anchors. They fell asleep like that, leaning against him, trusting him with a trust that terrified and honored him at the same time. Grayson stayed on the floor all night, and as the first gray light of morning crept across the windows, he realized something irreversible had happened. He was no longer just a man who had found two lost children. He was someone who could never pretend not to see them again. Morning came softly, like it was afraid to wake them. Gray light filtered through the tall windows of the penthouse, touching the blankets, the sofa, the quiet shapes of three people who had fallen asleep in an arrangement that made no logical sense, and yet felt unavoidable. Grayson woke first, his back stiff from the floor. He didn't move right away. Ivy's small hand rested on his forearm. June's head was tucked against his shoulder. They were warm, safe, breathing evenly. For a moment, he let himself pretend this was normal. Then reality returned. He shifted carefully, inch by inch, until he could stand without waking them. He covered them with an extra blanket and went to the kitchen. For the first time in years, he set out 3 plates. The sound of eggs sizzling filled the apartment, breaking the silence that Ivy had called too quiet. When the smell reached the living room, Ivy stirred. She sat up, blinking, instantly alert. June, she whispered, shaking her sister gently. Wake up. June opened her eyes and panicked for half a second, until she saw Grayson at the stove. You're still here, she said. Yes, Grayson replied without turning, and breakfast is almost ready. They ate slowly at the counter, wrapped in blankets like oversized shawls. Ivy studied everything, how the toaster worked, how Grayson moved, how he checked the heat before handing June a mug. This is like a hotel, June murmured. Grayson smiled faintly. It's just a kitchen. After breakfast, he crouched in front of them. Today we're going back to the park. Ivy stiffened. To wait, to ask questions, Grayson said. People must have seen something. June tilted her head. What if they didn't? Grayson held her gaze. Then we keep asking. They returned to Lincoln Park just after 9. The bench waited exactly as they'd left it, damp from morning dew. Grayson scanned the area with new eyes. The hot dog cart at the entrance, the newspaper kiosk, the security post near the bank building. Someone had to remember. They started with the hot dog vendor, a man with a gray mustache and a voice that carried. Excuse me, Grayson said. I'm looking for a woman who was here last week. Dark hair, 2 little girls. The vendor frowned. I'm here every day, haven't seen them. Grayson felt the first flicker of frustration. They were here for 4 days. The man shook his head. 2 kids alone, I would have noticed. Ivy stood very still beside Grayson, her face unreadable. Next was the newspaper stand. Same answer. Then the coffee cart. Same denial. By the 4th person, Grayson's jaw ached from clenching it. How is that possible? He muttered. June tugged his sleeve. They didn't see us, she said softly. Grayson knelt. Why do you think that is? Ivy hesitated, then spoke. Because we were quiet. Grayson froze. Mommy said not to bother anyone, Ivy continued. So we didn't cry. We didn't ask. We just sat. June nodded. If people walked by, we pretended we were waiting for someone. The truth landed like a punch. They hadn't been invisible by accident. They had been obedient. Grayson sat on the bench, Ivy on one side, June on the other. It was the same bench, same tree, same path, same ordinary slice of city life that people passed through without looking down. "No one remembers us," June said quietly. Grayson looked at the people moving through, the park joggers, parents, office workers on phones. He imagined the last 4 days through the girl's eyes, 2 small bodies, still, silent, waiting. "How did you eat?" he asked. June shrugged. "Sometimes trash." Grayson's chest tightened, and once Ivy added quickly, "A lady gave us a sandwich. Just one." "What about water? We drank from the fountain," June said. "At night it's quieter." Grayson pressed his palms into his knees. Anger rose hot, violent, and focused. Not at the girls, at the world. He stood abruptly and walked behind the oak tree. There it was, the hidden space. The leaf bed, the cardboard. 4 nights. 4 nights, and no one had stopped. When he returned, Ivy watched him carefully. "Are we in trouble?" she asked. "No," Grayson said immediately. "You did exactly what you were told." June's voice trembled. "Mommy said being good means staying quiet." Grayson knelt in front of them, forcing himself to speak slowly. "Listen to me. Being good does not mean being invisible." Ivy frowned, confused. "But we didn't want to bother anyone." "That's the problem," Grayson said, his voice breaking despite himself. "You should have bothered everyone." He looked around the park again. "People saw you. They just didn't want to see." June wrapped her arms around herself. "Did we do something wrong?" "No," Grayson said firmly. "The adults did." He took a deep breath, steadying himself. This was the moment. The line between helping quietly and refusing to stay silent. "Do you know what happens now?" he asked. Ivy shook her head. "You stop being quiet," Grayson said. "You stop waiting in corners. You stop disappearing." June looked up. "How by letting me be loud for you?" He pulled out his phone and dialed Naomi. "I need posters," he said the moment she answered. "Photos, full coverage, and media contacts." "Understood," Naomi replied without hesitation. Grayson hung up and looked back at the girls. "We're going to find your mom, and this time we're going to make noise." Ivy's eyes filled not with fear, but with something new. Relief. June reached for his hand. "Thank you for seeing us." Grayson closed his fingers around hers. "I will never pretend you're not there again." The city changed its tone once Grayson decided not to stay quiet. Within hours, Lincoln Park filled with flyers. Missing Serena Mercer. Dark hair, scar on chin, silver ring with blue stone. 2 daughters waiting. Grayson hired a private investigator, Caleb Hart, former homicide, sharp-eyed and unsentimental. "Disappearance doesn't always mean abandonment," Caleb said after reviewing the details, "especially not with kids this young." Grayson nodded. "I know. They retraced Serena's last known route. The morning she left. The streets she would have crossed. The clinics where she cleaned. The job listings she might have followed. Hospitals." Caleb's eyes narrowed. "That's where I'd start." That afternoon, Grayson returned home to find Ivy and June coloring at the kitchen counter. They looked up instantly. "Did you find her?" Ivy asked. "Not yet," Grayson said honestly. "But we're closer." June held up her drawing. It was 3 stick figures holding hands, one taller. "That's Mommy," she said. "That's Ivy. That's me. And that's you." Grayson swallowed. "I'm not." "You're there," Ivy said simply. "You stayed." That night, as the girls slept, Grayson stood by the window, staring out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Serena Mercer had vanished without meaning to. And for the first time in his life, Grayson Hale wanted something more than success. He wanted justice. And he was prepared to use everything he had to get it. Caleb Hart didn't believe in coincidences. He spread the city map across Grayson's dining table, weighted down by coffee mugs and a crumpled flyer. His finger traced a thin red line from Lincoln Park toward downtown, following the route Serena Mercer would have taken if she were looking for work that Monday morning. She cleaned offices, Caleb said. Mostly early shifts, sometimes clinics, sometimes private buildings. Grayson leaned over the map. There's a medical plaza here, he said, pointing, 2 blocks from a major intersection. Caleb nodded slowly. Which means traffic, cameras, and accidents. The word landed heavier than either of them wanted. They started with hospitals. Not the big private ones first, the places with immaculate lobbies and strict intake systems, but the public hospitals. County facilities. ERs that absorbed people who didn't have insurance, didn't have IDs, didn't have anyone waiting for them. By noon, Caleb had made 7 calls. By 3, he'd made 12. At 4:17 p.m., his phone finally went quiet. Then it rang. Caleb listened without speaking, his expression tightening in increments Grayson had learned to read. When the call ended, he didn't look up right away. There's a Jane Doe, Caleb said finally. Admitted 3 weeks ago. Hit and run, female, mid-20s. Grayson's pulse spiked. Where Mercy General, Caleb replied. ICU, no identification, no visitors. She's been unconscious most of the time. Grayson felt the room tilt. Does she match? Caleb opened a folder. Dark hair, small scar on the chin. Grayson stopped breathing, and Caleb continued carefully. She was wearing a silver ring with a blue stone when she was brought in. The world narrowed to a single point. That's her, Grayson said, his voice barely audible. That's Serena. Caleb studied him. We don't have official confirmation yet. I don't need it, Grayson replied. He grabbed his coat. I need to see her. On the drive to the hospital, Grayson's mind fractured into images. Serena crossing the street. A car that didn't stop. The sound of impact. Her falling. The girls waiting on the bench, obedient and silent, believing their mother would return any minute now. 3 weeks. 3 weeks of waiting for a woman who had been fighting to wake up in a hospital bed. Pull over, Grayson said suddenly. Caleb slowed. What Grayson stared out the window, breathing hard. Give me a second. Caleb did. Grayson pressed his forehead against the cold glass and closed his eyes. She didn't leave them. He said more to himself than to anyone else. She never left them. No, Caleb agreed quietly. She didn't. Grayson straightened. Take me to Mercy General. Mercy General smelled like disinfectant and exhaustion. The halls were narrow, the lights too bright, the air heavy with quiet suffering. Grayson followed Caleb past nurses' stations and curtained rooms each step, pulling him closer to something he'd been preparing for and dreading at the same time. They stopped in front of a glass door. ICU. Caleb gestured gently. That's her. Grayson stepped forward and everything else disappeared. Serena Mercer lay in the bed like a shadow of the woman Ivy and June had described with such certainty. Her dark hair was spread across the pillow. Her skin was pale, almost translucent. Tubes and wires traced her body machines breathing and counting for her. And there on her hand was the silver ring with the blue stone. Grayson's throat closed. It's her, he said. A nurse approached her, expression professional but kind. Are you family? No, Grayson replied honestly. But I'm taking care of her daughters. That changed everything. The nurse softened instantly. You can go in, she said, but keep it brief. Grayson washed his hands, the sound of running water unnaturally loud in his ears. He stepped into the room and approached the bed slowly, as if Serena might break if he moved too fast. He pulled a chair close and sat. Serena, he said quietly, testing the name. My name is Grayson. No response. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, a bracelet made of mismatched plastic beads. Pink, blue, yellow. June had made it the night before. She wanted you to have this. Grayson murmured, fastening it carefully around Serena's wrist. It was too small, but it fit on the last notch. Your daughters are safe, he continued. They waited for you. 4 days. They believed you would come back. His voice broke despite his effort to stay calm. Ivy said you always keep your promises, he said. June still sleeps holding her sister's sleeve. They take care of each other because you taught them how. Grayson told her everything. About the bench, the suitcases, the diner, the penthouse that was too quiet, the drawings on the wall, the nightmares at 3:15 a.m. You raised 2 incredible girls, he whispered. Brave, gentle, loyal. He reached for Serena's hand. That's when it happened. A twitch, barely perceptible, a faint movement of her fingers against his skin. Grayson froze. Serena, he whispered. Another movement, stronger this time. Grayson stood abruptly. Nurse! The nurse rushed in, checking monitors, shining a light into Serena's eyes. She's responding, the nurse said, excitement breaking through her professional calm. She may be waking up. Grayson sank back into the chair, heart hammering. She's alive, he whispered. Serena woke in fragments, sound first. Beeping. A distant voice. Then pain, dull, heavy everywhere. She tried to move and couldn't. Panic surged. My daughters, she croaked the words, tearing at her throat. Grayson leaned forward instantly. They're safe, he said. I promise you they're safe. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused, searching. I left them, she whispered, tears spilling without control. I left them, no, Grayson said firmly. You were hit by a car. You didn't abandon them. 3 weeks, the doctor explained later. Head trauma. Broken bones. Unconscious. No ID. Serena sobbed, grief and relief colliding violently. They must hate me. They don't, Grayson said. They knew you'd never leave them by choice. When Serena was strong enough, Grayson brought the girls. Ivy entered first, cautious, eyes wide. June followed, clutching a bouquet of park flowers so tightly their stems bent. Mommy, Ivy whispered. Serena's face broke open with recognition. My babies. They rushed to her, careful of the wires collapsing into her arms, with sobs that had waited weeks to escape. You came back, June cried. I never stopped trying, Serena whispered into their hair. Never. Grayson stepped back, giving them space, watching a family stitch itself back together. Later, when the room was quiet again, Serena looked at Grayson with eyes full of tears and strength. You saved my family, she said. Grayson shook his head. You did. I just stayed. And for the first time since Lincoln Park, Grayson felt something settle inside him. Hope wasn't loud. Sometimes it was just a hand squeezing yours in a hospital room. The hospital room felt different the morning after Serena woke up. The machines were still there. The beeping hadn't stopped. But something invisible had shifted, like the air itself had finally exhaled. Serena sat propped against pillows, her face pale but awake eyes tracking Ivy and June as they colored at the small rolling table near the bed. She watched every movement as if afraid they might disappear again. You've grown, she murmured, reaching out carefully. Ivy leaned in immediately. June followed, pressing her cheek against Serena's arm. We waited, Ivy said simply. Serena closed her eyes, tears sliding down into her hair. I know, she whispered. I felt it. I felt you waiting. Grayson stood near the window, giving them space. For the first time since he'd entered this story, he didn't feel like he was intruding. He felt included. The doctor arrived with charts and careful optimism. She's improving faster than expected, he said. Another few days of observation, then discharge. Physical therapy will be necessary. Serena nodded, then froze. Discharge, she repeated. Where would we go? The question hung in the room, sharp and dangerous. Grayson saw it immediately, the fear Serena was trying to hide for her daughters. The same fear that had driven her out that Monday morning. The doctor cleared his throat. That's something you'll need to arrange. After he left, Silence returned. Ivy sensed it first. Mommy Serena smiled too fast. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just tired." June wasn't fooled. "You're scared," she said quietly. Serena swallowed. "A little." Grayson stepped forward then. "We don't have to solve everything today," he said calmly. "You're not alone anymore." Serena looked up at him, surprised by how much she needed to hear that. "I lost the apartment," she admitted softly. "Rent was overdue before the accident. My job. I haven't been there in weeks." Ivy stiffened. June reached for Serena's hand. Grayson didn't hesitate. "One problem at a time," he said. "First you heal." Serena studied his face, and after that Grayson met her gaze. "After that, we figure it out together." Something in Serena's shoulders loosened. For the first time since she'd woken up, she believed him. Serena was discharged on a Monday morning. The girls bounced with nervous excitement, clutching drawings in small bags. Grayson carried the single suitcase Serena owned, light in a way that told its own story. In the car, silence stretched thick with unspoken questions. Mommy June asked finally, "Are we going home?" Serena hesitated. "Not yet, sweetheart." Grayson watched her grip the door handle, knuckles white. When they arrived at the penthouse, Ivy froze. "This place," she whispered. "It smells like us." Serena stepped inside, slowly absorbing the drawings on the wall, the blankets folded on the sofa, the evidence of her daughter's lives continuing without her and being protected. Tears filled her eyes. "You lived here?" she asked Grayson. "Yes," he said. "With them." Serena turned to her daughters. "Were you good?" Ivy nodded fiercely. "We were brave." That night, after the girls fell asleep, Serena stood on the balcony staring at the city lights. "I can't stay," she said quietly when Grayson joined her. "You've done too much already." Grayson didn't argue. He waited. "I don't want my daughters thinking we survive because of charity," Serena continued. "They need to see me stand." Grayson nodded slowly. "Then don't call it charity." She turned to him. "Stay here temporarily," he said. "Not forever. Until you recover. Until you're back on your feet." Serena shook her head. "I can't pay. I'm not asking you to." Grayson interrupted gently. "This apartment is empty during the day. You'll be here with the girls while I work. They already feel safe here." Serena's voice cracked. "Why are you doing this?" Grayson looked past her toward the living room where two small shapes slept curled together. "Because you raised children who trusted a stranger," he said quietly. "That matters." Serena covered her mouth, tears spilling freely now. "I don't know how to accept this." Grayson smiled faintly. "One day at a time." She nodded. And just like that, the shape of their lives changed. The penthouse stopped feeling temporary. It happened in small ways. Ivy claimed the kitchen counter as her school desk. June rearranged the cushions into careful nests. Serena moved more slowly each day, growing stronger, cooking simple meals, humming under her breath without realizing it. Grayson noticed everything. One evening, Ivy looked up from her drawing. "Are we a family?" The question landed softly, but with weight. Serena froze. Grayson held his breath. "What do you think?" Serena asked carefully. June tilted her head. "Families are people who don't leave." Grayson swallowed. Serena reached for both girls. "Then yes," she said gently. "We are." Not long after, Serena found work again, part-time at first, then more. She saved carefully, planned quietly. Grayson never rushed her. Months later, they stood in front of a small yellow house with a garden barely bigger than the penthouse balcony. "It's ours," Serena said, keys shaking in her hand. The girls ran ahead, laughter ringing out into the street. Grayson stayed back, watching. Serena turned to him. "You didn't just help us survive," she said. "You helped us believe again." Grayson smiled, eyes wet. "You taught me what matters." They hugged not as rescuer and rescued, but as equals. And inside the little yellow house, a family chosen by fate and held together by love took its first real breath of peace. The hardest part wasn't surviving. It was learning how to stay. For weeks after Serena moved into the penthouse, she lived with a quiet tension in her shoulders, like someone waiting to be told time was up. Every morning she woke before the girls made breakfast, cleaned what was already spotless folded blankets that didn't need folding. Grayson noticed. "You don't have to earn your place here every day," he said gently one morning as Serena scrubbed the counter for the third time. Serena didn't look up. "I'm not trying to earn it," she replied. "I'm trying to deserve it." That sentence stayed with him. The girls adjusted faster than either adult expected. Ivy thrived on routine school worksheets. Naomi brought reading time at the counter, careful plans drawn in colored pencils. June bloomed in comfort, laughing louder, asking more questions, building imaginary worlds out of cushions and blankets. But at night, when the apartment settled into silence, Serena sometimes sat alone on the sofa, staring at the city lights. Grayson joined her one evening, keeping a respectful distance. "I used to think if I stopped moving, everything would fall apart," Serena said quietly. "So I never stopped. Not even when I was exhausted." "You stopped because you were hit by a car," Grayson said. She shook her head. "No, I stopped because I finally ran out of strength." Grayson understood that feeling better than he wanted to admit. "I was scared," Serena continued. "Scared that if I accepted help, I'd forget how to stand on my own." "And now?" Grayson asked. "And now," she said slowly, "I'm learning that standing doesn't mean standing alone." The real test came the day Serena received a rejection email. She sat at the table, staring at the screen long after the girls had gone to bed. Grayson found her there, shoulders trembling. "They said I have too much instability," she said, voice breaking, "like survival is a flaw." Grayson felt anger rise, but he stayed calm. "That's not the end," he said. "It's one door. I don't want the girls to think we're fragile," Serena whispered. Grayson met her eyes. "Let them see you try. Let them see you rest. That's strength, too." The next morning, Serena applied again, and again, and again. Weeks passed. Then one afternoon, her phone rang. A medical clinic needed an administrative assistant. Stable hours, benefits, a chance. Serena hung up and stared at Grayson, stunned. "They want to meet me." Grayson smiled, not triumphant, not proud, just steady. "You earned that," he said. That night, Serena told the girls. Ivy listened carefully, then nodded. "That means we'll have a schedule," she said. June clapped. "And Mommy will come home at the same time every day." Serena laughed through tears, and Grayson realized something quietly monumental. This wasn't a rescue anymore. It was a rebuilding. 6 months later, the key felt heavier than it should have. Serena stood on the sidewalk, staring at the small house with the yellow door, her hand shaking as she held the metal ring. The garden was modest, the paint slightly faded, but the windows caught the afternoon sun in a way that made the place feel alive. "Is this really ours?" June asked, eyes wide. Serena nodded, unable to speak. Ivy stepped closer, inspecting the porch, like a serious evaluator. "It has space," she decided. "Enough." Grayson stood a few steps back, hands in his coat pockets, watching them claim the moment. He had helped with the down payment paperwork, not as a savior, but as a silent supporter. Serena insisted on every signature, every number, every responsibility. She opened the door. The house smelled like fresh paint and possibility. The girls ran from room to room, voices echoing down the hallway. Ivy claimed the window seat in one bedroom. June found the backyard and immediately planned where flowers would go. Serena moved slowly, touching the walls, as if confirming they were real. "You did this," Grayson said quietly. She turned to him. "I didn't do it alone." "No," he agreed. "But you did the work." That evening, they ate dinner on the floor, takeout boxes, paper plates, laughter bouncing off bare walls. It felt perfect. Later, when the girls were distracted outside, Serena walked Grayson to the porch. "I was wrong about rich people," she said softly. "I thought money made distance. But you showed me it can make space for others." Grayson exhaled. "You showed me that success without people is just noise." She smiled. "Will you still come for Sunday dinners always?" he said without hesitation. From the living room window, Ivy watched them. "They're talking like family," she whispered to June. June nodded. He stayed. As the sun dipped below the houses, Serena locked the yellow door for the first time, not to keep the world out, but to hold something precious in. And Grayson, standing on the sidewalk as he watched the light glow warmly behind those windows, understood the final truth of the journey. He hadn't just helped a family find their way home. He had finally found his own place to belong. Time did what it always did, quietly, steadily, without asking permission. A year passed, not the kind of year that made headlines or changed stock prices, but the kind that rewrote lives in small, stubborn ways. The kind measured in school calendars, grocery lists, and Sunday dinners that always seemed to end too late. The yellow house grew into itself. The garden June had planned turned messy and beautiful, with flowers that bloomed where Serena hadn't meant to plant them. Ivy's window seat became her reading corner, stacked with library books and notebooks filled with careful handwriting. Serena's mornings began early again, but now she left for work with a steady rhythm, keys and coffee in hand, returning every evening at almost the same minute. Predictability had become a gift. Grayson came every Sunday. Sometimes he brought groceries, sometimes books, sometimes nothing at all, just himself. He learned the girls' schedules, their favorite meals, the exact way June liked her pancakes, and how Ivy preferred silence when she was thinking. They stopped calling ahead, calling. The door was simply opened. One Sunday afternoon, rain pressed softly against the windows while Serena washed dishes and the girls worked on homework at the table. Grayson sat nearby pretending to read while listening to Ivy explain a math problem to June with great seriousness. "You subtract first," Ivy said, tapping the paper. "Then you check your answer." June frowned. "What if it's wrong? Then you try again," Ivy replied without hesitation. Grayson smiled. Later, when the girls ran outside to splash in puddles despite Serena's half-hearted protests, the kitchen fell into a comfortable quiet. Serena dried her hands on a towel and leaned against the counter. "Do you ever think about that day?" she asked. Grayson knew exactly what she meant. "Every time I pass a park," he said, "especially at dusk." Serena nodded. "I used to replay it in my head, the morning I left them. I wondered what would have happened if I'd taken a different street." "And now," Grayson asked, "and now I don't torture myself anymore," she said softly, "because I know what happened after." They stood there for a moment, listening to the rain and the distant laughter of two children who no longer sounded afraid. That evening after dinner, Ivy sat beside Grayson on the couch. She was quiet for a long time, long enough that he knew she was building up to something important. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Always," Grayson replied. She twisted her fingers together. "If you hadn't stopped at the park, would we still be there?" Grayson didn't rush the answer. He had learned that some questions deserved honesty more than comfort. "Yes," he said quietly. "Probably." Ivy nodded, once absorbing it. "Then I'm glad you stopped." June, listening from the floor, looked up. "Me too," she added. "You're the one who stayed." Grayson felt his chest tighten. "Your mom stayed too," he said. June smiled. "Yes, but you didn't have to." That was the truth, and they all knew it. That night, as Grayson prepared to leave, Serena walked him to the door like she always did. The house behind them hummed with warmth, water running in the bathroom, Ivy reading aloud to June, the soft thud of life continuing. "I want you to know something," Serena said, her voice steady. I don't think of what you did as saving us anymore. Grayson tilted his head. No, no, she said. You gave us a bridge. We crossed it ourselves. Grayson swallowed. You don't owe me, I know, Serena interrupted gently. That's why it matters. They stood there, not touching, not needing to. From the hallway, June called out, You're coming next Sunday, right? Grayson smiled. I wouldn't miss it. When he stepped outside, the street was quiet. The yellow door closed behind him, not as a goodbye, but as punctuation. As Grayson walked to his car, he thought back to the man he'd been before Lincoln Park. The man who measured success in square footage and numbers on screens. The man who believed solitude was the same as peace. He understood now how wrong he'd been. Peace wasn't quiet. Peace was knowing where you belonged. Inside the house, Serena tucked the girls into bed. Ivy yawned, eyes heavy. June curled against her sister. Mommy, Ivy murmured. Are we lucky? Serena brushed her hair back, smiling softly. We are, June smiled sleepily. Because he saw us. Serena nodded. Because he saw you, and because we never stopped believing. The lights went out one by one, and somewhere in the city a man who had once believed he was alone drove home with a heart that was finally full, knowing that the best thing he had ever done wasn't a deal he'd closed or a building he'd owned. It was the moment he chose not to look away. Did this story move you? Share your thoughts in the comments and rate this story from 1 to 10. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell icon so you don't miss other heartwarming stories. Click on the last screen to see the next emotional chapter waiting for you. See you in the next story.